Welcome to the reality show, day 73 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by Robert Nasser, Marco, and Richard, and we are going to talk about a couple of topics. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about, I chose this, so I should remember it, but it was, there are calls for banning Israel from the Eurovision contest. Those of you who are not in Europe, probably one of the things you're missing out on the most is the Eurovision contest that happens every year here. Marco and Richard, I believe you rejected my invitation to our Eurovision watch party this year, but I'm still hopeful for next year. Although if Israel is banned, I don't know if I'm going to watch it. And British Airways in their in-flight entertainment has removed a show. The show is called Hapless. It's kind of it's a show about a Jewish newspaper and yeah, I guess they didn't want to be seen as taking sides, and I guess showing Jews is taking sides. They've since changed their mind on that. But first, we are going to talk about Greta's Jihad. Greta Thunberg, who has been on strike since before she was part of the workforce, and still on strike before she's part of the workforce, she's striking about climate change and the fact that we should all stop using any type of energy that works. She has taken up another cause in recent months, which is the cause of supporting Hamas in their war to exterminate Israel. I don't know how we must have brought this up at some point. I don't remember everything we talked about over the last 2.5 months, but I'm pretty sure we talked about it. We're going to talk about it some more today. Robert, your initial thoughts about Greta and her jihad and her general support for the Palestinians?
Can't believe this little witch won't go away. It's crazy that anybody regards her as a spokesperson for anything. What the hell? What is her credibility? What is her authority? Why would anybody listen to this horrible person? Now, you remember a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, since we've been talking about Greta Thunberg, I've always dismissed her. I've always blown this off. She's a little girl. She's got a psychological disability. People feel sorry for her. Let her say her thing. She just won't go away. It's the craziest thing. I've had it. I've had it with Greta. Her whole premise here goes right back to her environmental beliefs, her beliefs that people are destroying the world. People are just the worst. People are terrible. And now she wants to weigh in on a war that Israel didn't start, and somehow Israel is the problem. No, Greta's got to go away. This is intolerable. Again, I've dismissed this before. I've said evil is impotent. We know that evil is impotent. Evil doesn't matter. Get on and live your lives. Well, she's affecting all of our lives. And now she's trying to affect the lives of the people fighting in Israel, the civilians in Israel, everybody, even in Gaza. She is ruining everything. She's got to stop. She has got to go away. This has gone beyond just she's a poor child who thinks, oh, people are destroying the world. She is now guilty of enormous malice, deserves every criticism that she receives, and people need to speak out about it. People need to say, no, this is not some poor innocent teenager who thinks, oh, we're doing bad things to the world. No, she is going from being the victim based on what she was brought up with to being the perpetrator. And this has got to stop. So by all means, let's keep doing shows where we say she's wrong, and she's worse than wrong. She's vile.
Yeah, and the idea that people are terrible is obviously part of the environmentalist shtick. And the irony is, people have free will, and many choose to be terrible. And if you choose to be terrible, you will probably get Greta's support, because really, it's hard to think of anybody more vile than the Hamas terrorists that she supports. Also, on the point of her being a little girl with a problem, That's why they chose her as their spokesperson. Because then if you dare criticize her, you're attacking a little girl, who's autistic, and
Right.
that makes you the bad guy, no matter what it is that you say factually and
I'm
about.
sure you're right about that, but if that's what they were counting on, she's too old for that. The gloves are off.
Marco, Richard.
It's amazing how fast these little Marxists grow, and they're already writing for The Guardian. That's amazing. Well done, them. I bet they're doing in exchange for some local currency or some kind. Um, it's a great ad for what happens if you decide to be an activist and not go to school. You don't know many facts. The few facts you know, you don't really understand them. And certainly, you can't interpret them. Just look at what the kind of conceptual cock-ups she made throughout her article, talking about genocide, occupation, civilians, even conflating anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Well, anti-Semitism if you hate the Jews, Islamophobia if you're afraid of the Muslims, because they tend to blow people up. So, there's some kind of foundation behind that fear. Just as Robert said, just go away, shut up.
Yeah, and her organisation's gone from talking about forests and trees to rivers and seas, which perhaps should be their new slogan. And when you look at this article, it's written by not just her, but 3 other people. Together they make up, as listed, about 25 pronouns. I'm not exaggerating, they are listed, all of their pronouns on the article. They've written about a paragraph each. It's not particularly long. It's not particularly detailed. The point is solely that Greta's name is associated with an article. That's always been the purpose of anything related to Greta, that you can shove Greta's face on it and it gives it credentials. But what she says in the article, there's a quote from it. She says that this is the only reference to October the 7th in it. She says the horrific murders of Israeli civilians by Hamas cannot in any way legitimize Israel's blah, blah, blah. She doesn't say blah, blah, blah in this instance, although that is, of course, one of her phrases. But blah, blah, blah is about the only credence she's giving to what happened on October the 7th. That's how she's treating the events of October the 7th as, yeah, blah, 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 but look at what Israel's doing now, and trotting out all the standard tropes and accusations that we've been hearing across campuses, in protests, in our cities here on either side of the pond. It's really, really, really rather nasty and unpleasant, and not even remotely surprising.
Sorry, I'm muted. But yeah, I was just looking up the pronouns, and yeah, one of them has all pronouns. I didn't know you could do that, but that's good to know. What were you saying, Marco? I didn't get that.
He's a bit of a pronoun whore. He wants them all.
Yeah, that's a bit unfair, and certainly not equal distribution of pronouns. But yeah, I mean, we make fun of these people because they deserve it, but also they are leaders of a big chunk of the culture. I mean, this is again, I spoke about in the Daily Objective how I'm really pessimistic. I think we're the best on this topic without a doubt, and on almost every topic out there. I think but we're really a very small. They talk about how they're on the side of marginalized communities. I don't know if that will make them support objectivists, but they're mainstream. We are far away from it. So even in the context of they deserve to be ridiculed because they're ridiculous, we need to take it seriously in that what they say, they're being listened to, and it has an impact. Robert,
if I could say something, I don't want to leave the topic of Greta without putting my Christmas message out there. You said, well, we make fun of Greta. Okay, some of us do. She's an easy target. I've never made fun of Greta. Maybe been a little insulting, but she deserves that. But you're right. We need to take this seriously. You know, I'm enjoying Christmas, the lead up to Christmas. It's a challenge to be an ARC co-host during this time of year because there's so much to celebrate, so much we should be focused on. The ARC UK just had their in-person Christmas party. Folks, we don't want you to be miserable this time of year. The whole point is you shouldn't be, but Christmas time has got me thinking about the end of the year. You know, time's running out for all the things you wanted to do in 2023. Our time is finite. Somebody like Greta Thunberg and everything she stands for and all of her allies are chipping away at our happiness. They make it a little harder for tech to do its job, for industry to do its job. And we think, well, but we're all pretty well off. She may only be affecting my life a little bit. But who is she affecting the most? By holding up tech, by holding up agriculture. Think about people who are ill, who are in the hospital, who are relying on technology, who are hoping for that next generation of technology. Greta Thunberg isn't life or death for me, but she is for them. Think about the kids around the world who are starving because agriculture, as great as the science is, needs to be kept pushing forward. Greta Thunberg isn't killing me, but she is killing those people. She is having that effect. Don't minimize this crazy girl or just make fun of her and then say, I got my shots in and I'm done. No, I'm glad we're having this show because she is going from being, again, the victim to being the killer. It's an important topic. People need to understand. And it's a great time of year to be reminded all of the great stuff we've got around us, this great holiday that we're all going to enjoy. That is what she's against. And not just those of us who it hurts a little bit, but the people who she is killing, her and her allies, her and anti-technology, her and anti-values.
Yeah, by the way, the Christmas party, what happens at the Christmas party stays at the Christmas party. So we're not going to elaborate on that. But yeah, back to the less fun topic. Margot, you mentioned the mention of Islamophobia, which is done not just by more mainstream people than Greta, and it's always mentioned in this way nowadays. Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, that's not a thing. By and large, it's the Muslims coming after the Muslims and their allies on the left and the right coming after the Jews. Yeah, not all Muslims. I think all Jews are within the legitimate target of the people who are on this side. But it's again, if you try to compare it historically, can you imagine anybody in this country saying we need to stop talking about the Germans as if they're the enemy? It's only Hitler and the people around him, and we need. This is, we were again talking about it on the Daily Objective. It's so unique to us how when we actually in the West nowadays decide that a war needs to be fought, we are apologetic from before we start and until after it's over, and it's over in never in in the way it should be. Marco.
Well, you're right. I mean, against here, she whoever wrote this thing, make the point that the people are dying following the response of Israel to October 7th. Well, it's not a response. We're not playing tennis. If somebody throw the ball at you, throw it back. Here we have a ceasefire, the thing that they are calling for. They've been calling for until October the 8th. And it was broken by Hamas people who happens to be people from Gaza, who happen to be sold to the deadly cult, which is Islam. And they went into Israel, murdered innocent people. And when Israel fights back, because it's their duty, the whole purpose of the state of Israel is to protect individuals in Israel. And when they do that, people start whinging about the fact that civilians died. Well, again, I've said it a number of times, but if you could protect the inhabitants of Gaza from the action that their government take, well, good luck to you. You cannot do that. They chose to attack Israel, and they are paying the consequence for their own decision. And, Crimea River, Happy Christmas, it's all on you guys.
I think one of the points in this article that they make is that they've been accused, or this organization that Greta founded has been accused of being politicized recently by by protesters who are being pro-Palestine or anti-Israel. And they're making the point that it's always been political. Well, absolutely, it's always been political. Even when it was environmental, it's always been Marxist. It's always been anti-human. It's always been trying to push a certain message in a certain way, which is why in this article, they cite all of the standard people to back up their point of view about how terrible Israel is. They cite Amnesty International. They cite the UN. They cite a professor who I won't bother to name, but he's described as an endowed professor in the study of modern genocide. Modern genocide, well, you know, the fact that you can apply genocide to anything you don't like in a modern context, in the same way you apply fascism to anything you don't like, or any set of the apartheid words or any of those things that have emotive connotations that people just slap on something in order to win over an argument, the same way they try and win over an argument by exploiting a ready-made victim such as Greta in the first incarnation of her appearance on the stage. So yeah, it's all very unconvincing, unsurprising. And
Yeah, and you know, we've spoken about how they use words and how genocide is now the number one buzzword, and of course it is their use of it is completely opposite of what it actually means. They're using it to accuse the victims of a genocide in their you know, feeble half-ass attempts to defend themselves. They're accusing them of genocide. So, and they're writing in The Guardian, which is, again, a paper we make fun of a lot, but it's mainstream. It is a mainstream newspaper. There are more readers of The Guardian than there are viewers of this show, unfortunately, which is another reason why I'm very pessimistic. Because, yeah, I mean, just reading through this thing, which I haven't actually read from start to finish, but it's just anywhere I look at it. Yeah, you mentioned the one mention of the slaughter is the sentence: the horrific murder of Israeli civilians by Hamas cannot in any way legitimize Israel's ongoing war crimes. I mean, they're not, you know, there's no real acknowledgement there. It's only acknowledged in the context of what Israel shouldn't do in response. And of course, in the same paragraph, no, it's not in the same paragraph. Where is it? Later on. Oh, yeah. In the next paragraph, it ends with, everyone speaking out on this crisis has a responsibility to distinguish between Hamas, Muslims, and Palestinians, and between the state of Israel, Jewish people, and Israelis. Now, this is, again, a narrative that unfortunately is the mainstream narrative, but the idea of distinguishing between Hamas and the Palestinian people is factually incorrect and is necessary in order to promote the agenda that then ends up with 51% of 18 to 21 to 24-year-old Americans thinking that the good thing that can come out of it is Hamas, you know, killing all the Jews and taking over Israel. Robert.
Yeah, if you want to end civilian deaths, Ms. Thunberg, it's easy. You just end the war. That's how you stop civilians. Civilians are going to die in a war. Look at any war in history. We don't even think much about civilian deaths. It's just part of what happens when there's a war. But it's easy. Just end the war. And there are two ways that you can end this war. There's two ways you can end any war. And that's either victory or surrender. Well, obviously, Israel is trying to achieve victory. But that's going to take some time. And a lot of people are going to die. And it's a war, so a lot of civilians are going to die. The alternative is the people who started the war, the aggressors, surrender. And that could happen almost immediately. Because Hamas is such a ragtag, quote-unquote government, it would take a few days. But they could end this now. They could end the civilian deaths. They could end this quote-unquote genocide. What the hell does that word even mean if that applies to this anymore? Obviously, it doesn't. It's just slander. Two ways to end it. Victory is, now some folks are out there saying, well, wait a minute. What if Israel surrenders? Well, they're claiming 18,800 civilian deaths in Gaza. I don't know if that number is accurate. If it is, we know whose moral responsibility that is. That is nothing compared to what you would see if you had a quote unquote surrender by Israel. It's not that that's not an option. It's not even conceivable. If you think that that's on the list of possibilities, you haven't thought through what that would mean. Well, what about victory for Gaza? What would a Gazan victory even look like? That's also not within the realm of possibility. Obviously, what Gaza is hoping for and what our people around the world who have no moral sense are hoping for is some kind of compromise. That is not going to happen. Every compromise that could happen is no different than a quote unquote Gazan victory or Israeli surrender. No, either Israel needs to win this war. It's what they're doing. It's what they're working on. There will be civilian casualties, and that's the only option they've got. Or Hamas needs to surrender and be excluded from, well, they all need to be shot, but whoever survives needs to be excluded from ever representing the people of Gaza ever again. There's only two options. I know folks want an alternative. They want a compromise. They want something in the middle. Think for a moment about what that would mean in reality, and you realize there's only two options. Israel wins, Hamas surrenders. That is how you end the civilian deaths. That is how you end the kind of friendly fire accident that we saw recently. Very sad, entirely on the head of the bastards who took them hostage in the first place. It's the only answer.
And note also that's another missing word from this article is the word hostages, because they're an inconvenient to work into your argument if you're making the argument that Greta's making. They're civilians of the same type that she's trying to defend on the other side that you need to just erase from existence because they destroy your own argument, or at least upset the emotive compass.
You couldn't be more right. That's exactly right. They're counting on us saying civilian deaths. Civilians are innocent victims. Yeah, what about the hostages? What about the acts that started this war?
Yeah, I have to say, by the way, I know surrender is an option, but Robert, if this war was run as I would like it to be run, it would not be. After October 7th, I would not give them the option to surrender. I would. I think that the right way to finish this war is for the Palestinian culture and way of life as it was up until now to no longer be a thing, not in Gaza, not in the West Bank, and I wouldn't have surrender as an option. But I also, again, Israel fights so apologetically. We talked about this on one of the shows a few days ago about I think it was the Daily Objective, about morale, and Israel is still, there are soldiers who do things that I think they should do. Like there was one where they, there was videoing themselves eating in front of terrorists that they captured or something, or singing or something. That's great. Of course you should do that. But of course they're gonna be punished for that. Soldiers who graffitied the place with "We're here to eat hummus" are gonna be punished. The ones who use the loudspeaker in the mosque to say stuff in Hebrew and some prayer and some other stuff, they're gonna be punished. That's not good. That's not good for the soldiers fighting the war. It's not good in terms of how the enemy sees this. The enemy sees this as like, we're done. The way things were up until October 6th, like, we fucked up. We can't do that anymore. That whole thing is a thing of the past. That's what Israel should convey in every way possible. First of all, with showing actually the superiority of its military and its firepower, and then showing the not just the superiority of its culture, but it's the fact that it is the only culture that's going to be allowed anymore, or that the culture that existed up until that moment will no longer be allowed. ARCUK.
Well, I don't know what else to add, to be honest. It is a war. It's not easy for people fighting on the defensive side, i.e. Israel. It's not easy to fight not only the enemy, which is Hamas and the culture that generates Hamas, but they're effectively fighting the whole world. I mean, just look at the UN since 1948, when they, looks like by accident, allow Israel to exist. They've been backpedaling, apologizing since. And it feels like Israel is the one that always has to justify its own existence. It's there. It's been there for 75 years now. What are we going to do? Are we going to just roll up the whole thing and move on and disperse the Jew population again, like we've done for the last 3,000 years? This whole impossibility of people to grasp how actually easy this issue is, how black and white it is, and it's quite depressing. I don't understand why they managed to get. Well, I know why they do it. I know why they try and conflate words and use wrong concepts and double speak and all this kind of stuff, because they have an agenda. The agenda is fundamentally anti-Semitic. It's anti-Israel, and everything else will be just playing second fiddle to it.
And just to do a Jen Psaki for a moment and circle back to Greta, the thing about Greta is that she's been put up there as a poster child for environmentalism, even in countries such as Israel. So Israel dropped her right at the beginning of this, when she first started coming out against Israel's response, to drop her from the curriculum on references to her and the way she was incorporated into the Israeli curriculum for promoting environmentalism straight away. But what does that prove? It also proves that you were complicit in helping to build her up by misunderstanding the principles behind the environmentalism. And that's part of the problem here, is that people aren't thinking properly about the principles underneath it all. And therefore you're leaping from concrete to concrete, from example to example, and therefore suddenly what's a hero one day is an enemy the next, because you didn't understand what they really stood for in the first place, which was your Marxism and your anti-human and your anti-reason and everything which Israel, from other contexts, is a great champion of doing the right thing from.
Yeah, Greta being a part of the curriculum in Israeli schools is another example of how of why Israel can't win fundamentally, because of the underlying philosophy. And we spoke about that again from the very start of this, from October 7th. We've been talking about it on the channel and saying, no, unfortunately, even this supposed wake-up call is not gonna make Israel do what needs to be done. And apparently, for the world, it was proof that the job that Hitler started needs to be finished. Margot, you mentioned the UN. I was just thinking, I would love for some country to just the General Assembly votes on things, and it's non-binding and not really important. It's just something to point to and see, look, everybody's telling you you're wrong, so how dare you think otherwise. I would love for some country to just say, suggest a resolution just dismantling Israel or something to that effect, just because I want to see how countries vote. I mean, Israel, the US, and Micronesia will vote against. Britain will abstain, as they do, but I want to see who votes for it. I think that'll be interesting. Anyway, any last thoughts on this topic before we go on to the Eurovision and British Airways?
Well, one thought is let Greta and people like her talk, and just ignore what she's saying, and just make the best for your life. Don't go down the route of their doom and gloom and anti-human agendas. Just make your own life as good as you can and stick it to them.
And where people are saying the right thing, whether they're within your circle or on the public stage, amplify those people as well.
And if I could say one more thing too, since Islamophobia came up in the context of Greta, I'm not Islamic, I'm not a Muslim, but I am a Syrian American, and with a last name Nasir, you would think over the course of decades, if Islamophobia was a substantial phenomenon, even if it was a trivial thing that, maybe sometimes happened to people, you would think over the course of a lifetime, I would have run into some of it. It is so made up. Now it's a big world. There's 8 billion people. I'm sure you can find people who faced some kind of unfair treatment because of their religion. Lord knows the Christians have. I think I've run into more of that as a Christian than anybody Islamic that I know. But it is, as a Syrian American, I want to say flat out, it ain't a thing. If anybody thinks that what's going on in the Middle East is a result of Islamophobia, we can go back to what the hell started this war? Oh, but they were already being oppressed. No, you look at what happened on October 7th, and you tell me that Islamophobia is a thing.
Somebody already kind of alluded to this in the chat. I wanted to kind of play devil's advocate and remind that, I told a story of how somebody asked me about how afraid are you in London, and I said not that much, like on a daily basis in the street. And they said, well, that's because you look like a Muslim. Robert, you don't look like I look more Muslim than you. That's why you're.
Well, no, it comes down to more online when people see my name and make assumptions. You're right. I don't have that look. I've got more Syrian blood in me than anything else, but the European side did come through. Again, I have had people engage with me as an Arab American. Usually they're disappointed that I don't speak one of the languages, but I have never seen any kind of negative reaction to that.
I mean, Islamophobia became a thing after 9/11, and it was a code speak for don't blame the Muslims. When, we know who did it, so what the hell?
So I think the one part of the next story, I'm guessing, is not really news for our audience, because I'm sure everybody who watches the channel regularly on a daily basis follows everything that the Association of Composers and Lyricists of Iceland says. But the latest thing, for anybody who maybe accidentally missed it, is that they now want Israel banned from the Eurovision in the same way that Russia was banned after it attacked Ukraine. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind on this is this thing that the anti-Israel crowd, or big chunks of it, tries to do, which is to somehow try to be on Ukraine's side and on Hamas's side, which is very bizarre. And of course, it's, they are the underdog, they're seemingly the underdog, but it really requires ignoring a lot of facts around this topic. One big part of it is the fact that Putin is pro-Hamas, and Hamas has thanked him publicly for his support, and both sides are fighting for tyranny, whereas the Ukraine and Israel are fighting against it. But yeah, I think this might happen. Just based on past experience. I don't know how likely it is. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't. I wouldn't be too shocked if it does. Marco, Richard, I want to go to you first. Even though you don't watch the Eurovision, you're both in countries or in a country that participates, and grew up in countries that participate. So, yeah, any thoughts?
Yeah, for the record, we didn't come to a Eurovision party because of a tube strike, not because of Eurovision. I would like to make that clear. We have seen Eurovision many times for many years down the line. It's a long time ago. It used to be nothing but fun, and it was about a music contest, which is what it is. In case you don't know, it is a music contest between a whole bunch of countries, most of whom are in Europe. For some reason, there are always a few odd ones, like Israel, for one, and more recently Azerbaijan, and even more recently Australia, who were also treated as Europe. So if you get your head around that, it's something to do with broadcasters and their allegiances and various things like that. But anyway, it covers a good chunk of about some 40 odd countries competing for a song contest, with people voting from all the countries for anyone except their own. It's always had a lot of feuds, in terms of inter-country feuds and voting for your friends and your neighbours, and nothing to do with a song. And in recent years, a hell of a lot of virtue signalling and involved in it. And what you're talking about here is kind of the background to that going up an extra political level, where you're making the fun. It always gets political. doesn't it, sooner or later? And that's a shame, because it really ought to be an escape from all of that and a chance to just have a good time and a bit of a party. But no, they've crapped all over that one too.
I mean,
Marco, I just want to quickly point out, because Richard, you mentioned the countries that aren't in Europe. Lebanon, I don't know if you remember this. Lebanon was also going to be in the Eurovision a few years ago or a decade ago or so. And the reason they pulled out is because each country had to have a website for Eurovision with the flags of the different countries, and they refused to have the flag of Israel. So yeah, that didn't work out.
Well, maybe they'll be able to join this year then, if Israel isn't in it.
Yeah, who knows? And maybe there will be a Hamas representative as well. Marco,
imagine how good those songs would be. These guys from Iceland, I mean, they're writing songs for the Eurovision, so you wouldn't expect a massive depth of intellectual prowess among the 15 of them or wherever they are. But not to be able to recognize the difference between an aggressor and a victim is quite depressing. I mean, it doesn't take much of a leap to work that one out. But to equate Israel and Russia, I think it's a bit offensive, and also it's a bit offensive for themselves, because they're just a bunch of muppets. They're just revealing themselves of what they know, which is very little. What I find particularly interesting in the article is when they say that most of the victims in Gaza are women and children. Yes, because the men are all hiding in tunnels that they've been digging for the last 25 years. And throwing rockets to Israel. So that's why they tend to be safer from the not very strong action of Israel.
Just another quick point about Israel's participation. So I don't know if this is along the same lines, but Israel, Israeli football teams play in European competitions as well. And the reason for that is Israeli teams used to play in Asian competition, and like the team I support in Israel won the Asian Champions Cup or whatever it's called long before I was born twice, just because teams wouldn't show up to play against the Jews. So at some point, it's very nice to win titles, but it's nicer to win them by actually playing. So they moved to Europe, yet to win any title there. But there's always if there's hope in anything, it's there. Robert, Marco, you have another thing to add?
I would just say that if Qatar can run the World Cup, anything can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can give the musician's perspective, I remember the early days of Ayn Rand Center UK's YouTube, and we used Clubhouse as well as an alternate platform. And on the weekends, on Sundays, we would have the weekly objective, audio only, just on Clubhouse, great fun. And it would often open with a musical segment from our own Jonathan Honig, who would sing along with a karaoke track, usually appropriate to whatever his topic for the day was. And I only mention that because Jonathan's in the chat with a super chat for $4.99. Jonathan, thank you for that. That's very cool. Those were the days. Oh man, that was fun. Probably could have lost it on a copyright violation if we'd been on the YouTube side. But I love that Israel is being treated as European, both in sports and in music, which shows that the European organizers have got far more sense than the Musicians Union in Iceland. As a musician, I remember here in the United States, in the colonies, we had Soviets, back in the 70s and the 80s, when the Soviet Union was still the hardcore communist country and not a ridiculous half-red dictatorship that it is now. And we would have cultural, they would send pianists and orchestras and musicians over. We did cultural exchanges with Mao's China. And these idiots in Iceland want to complain about having a country, again, that was attacked, that is not an aggressor nation. They want to complain that they're going to be part of a talent show. Really? I don't mean to trivialize Eurovision. I understand it's a very big deal in Europe, but come on, Christmas is coming, for Christ's sake. So as a musician, I think I'm well positioned to say those people are nuts.
By the way, I don't know if Jonathan, one of the great things about Clubhouse is that it wasn't recorded. So,
Right.
Nobody ever heard that ever again. I don't know if Jonathan wants that information out there, but Yeah.
Well, he
Now
was
it
damn
is.
good. He should want it out there.
Yeah, actually, that's true. Musical performances by Jonathan Hoenig would be a thing on the channel if I could convince him, which is a good time to remind people that you can super chat or become members, and maybe we can use that to incentivize Jonathan to sing regularly on the channel. I had another point there, but oh yeah, the other point was this show is recorded. So Robert, you calling the Eurovision a talent show is now online forever. People can find it and
It
come back
is.
to haunt us
We'll
all.
see. We'll see what comes out of that.
So another topic, I think it was kind of along the same lines as this. I didn't really know if it would be end up being like two parts of a second topic or a second and a third topic, but it is British Airways' decision to remove the show Hapless from its in-flight entertainment that you get when you fly on long haul, and you have your own screen and you can choose from a bunch of TV shows and movies. They removed that show, and they then brought it back. They removed it because they didn't want to appear to be taking sides in the conflict. They brought it back. Let me start with this. Has anybody here, has any of you seen that show?
No,
All right.
haven't been on British Airways in a while.
Well, that show
Or
is
in
available
Britain.
elsewhere.
Yes.
But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it is a show that all they do is wave Israeli flags and say terrorism is bad, in which case you are taking a side. And of course, but for me, the idea of taking a side, I mean, you should take a side. I know it's bad. It'll be terrible for British Airways business-wise if they say, we support Israel. They'd be banned from a bunch of countries they fly to. Many of their customers would stop flying them. They should not be the ones leading the battle, the intellectual battle here. But yeah, still, it's another sign of the situation where we have the idea of taking a side between civilized people and savages, seeing that as a bad thing. So
I have to admit, I have a much lighter perspective on this story when I read it, because the title of the show is Hapless, and their decision was such a hapless one that I wouldn't be laughing if it wasn't for the fact that they reconsidered and brought it back, made themselves look only a little bit less foolish than they were in the first place, but not much. And apropos of the title of the show, I had to laugh. I probably shouldn't, but there hasn't been much else we've talked about today that is amusing.
So Marco, Richard, you're both in the UK. You're both very close to all the British Airways hubs. I don't know if this will affect your decision. Next time you travel, will you choose a different airline because of this? Will you choose British Airways because of this?
Well, funny that I've just parked my 747 down here. It's still in second line, so I have to rush this one.
By the way, British Airways retired at 747, so is that one of them?
Not this one. I mean, what kind of stupid decision was that? If you start removing any content because it's linked to Jewishness, well, I hope you like Bollywood, because from the Hollywood catalog, you ain't gonna get mad. And it's Christmas, so if you don't want to talk about Jimbo Christ and all this kind of stuff, it's not gonna go down very well with the audience. It's just the whole idea. It's such a typical knee jerk that gives you a black eye, isn't it? It's just so British.
When I pick a flight, I care that my pilot is trained and awake. I care that the plane is serviced and fueled. I care that me and my luggage go to the same destination as it says on my ticket. Those are the things. I don't really care what's on the in-flight catalogue of comedy shows, whether they're in or out or not. But I am amused by these preemptive strikes, these fence hunting that companies do, where they throw out a boomerang and it comes right round and hits them in the back of the head, with somebody else being offended by the fact they threw it in the first place. It's just so messy. It's so unnecessary. You should have just shut up, shouldn't you? Wise advice, I think.
Yeah, and that's what raised the question here. Like, why do this and mention it? I do fly British Airways long haul regularly nowadays. Things, they change their offering on their IFEs every month. I see things that I like that have gone away. I I never make anything of it. I didn't notice this one, but I wouldn't make anything of it unless they tell me that I should. And yeah, when you tell people that they should make something of it, they will. Robert.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. There was no reason for this, and eventually they figured it out. And maybe I'm too forgiving, but I give them props for figuring it out. Because we know that opinion on this is such a mess. I don't think they changed their mind for political or pragmatic reasons. I think somebody just figured out it was the wrong thing to do, because there's so much. It's so easy to hate on Israel right now that they could have left that decision in place. Whoever made the horrible decision, down with them. But I've got to give them props for changing their mind and turning it back around. Maybe I'm too forgiving. Maybe it's the Christmas season that has me in a forgiving mood. But again, of our three topics today, this to me was the lightest and almost I won't say a happy ending. That has a different meaning these days. A Hollywood ending. Maybe that's the appropriate expression to use.
Yeah, I think it was just one of those stupid decisions stemming from working from home. Somebody from, after watching Netflix, perhaps was too fired up and came up with a stupid decision. And as soon as the bosses looked at it, it's like, no, I don't think so, love.
Yeah, thumbs up for the correction. So absolutely. And, if we want to mine for anti-Semitism, we can find it far easier all over the place than in this particular example, to be honest. So it's also a lot of white noise going on here. So, read a book.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in part, this affects me because I do fly British Airways and make sure all my spend goes on credit cards that earn British Airways miles. But the good thing is I can transfer those miles to Qatar. So in any way, they will be used. Christopher Smith wins the award for non-super chat comment that gets read out because it's a Seinfeld reference. Uncle Leo thinks everyone's an anti-Semite. Yes, that's true, I believe. Robert, you have seen Seinfeld, right?
I have not. I am not a Seinfeld fan, and I know I should be. It's almost the official objectivist comedy du jour, but I'll catch up at some point.
Well, just as a really lighter topic is Daniel yesterday watched Seinfeld possibly for the first time at my place because he was in London for the Christmas party before.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So what was the question? Sorry, I had a different microphone.
You saw Seinfeld yesterday. Your verdict?
I liked it, but it's really fast-paced. Like, it's crazy.
In America, for 30-minute shows, they have 22 or 23 minutes of actual content that they need to fit in, and they like to fit everything into those shows. Yeah, if you compare American sitcoms to British sitcoms, the pace is very different. Also, the length of shows is very different. In Britain, they have 6 episodes for a season, and they, for some artistic bullshit reason, that's the right way to do it. In the US, you have 20-something episodes every year. The shows run for a decade as opposed to 2 or 3 years. But yes, I think we can, if we're gonna. And I was saying I'm pessimistic and I can't, end anything on a positive note. Maybe
it's those darn capitalists. In America, because of all of our television commercials, we have a 30-minute show, but it's 22 and a half minutes of show and 7.5 minutes of commercials. So damned capitalists, they make all of our shows have to be too fast-paced.
And now that we have it on Netflix, we can watch it without the commercials, but we have to pay $10 a month or whatever it is. So Again, the capitalists. And by the way, let me tie this into what we're doing, which is I saw today an article, story in Israeli media that Jerry Seinfeld flew to Israel today with his family to show support. Went, into the streets, wasn't hiding in his hotel or anything. Spoke to people. He posted on Instagram something very nice. Some parts of it I wouldn't agree with, but overall, it's nice to see. And that's another thing. I think when Mark is back from Austin and we have him back on the channel, I want to ask him about. I asked him already, but I want to ask him again about Hollywood being not as anti-Israel as they usually are left wing, and to what extent that is because of the fact that many people in Hollywood realize they would be among those exterminated. I mean, one of the chants we hear in these protests now is globalize the Intifada. Globalize the Intifada is a way of saying killing all the Jews in in Israel is not enough. We need to kill all the Jews everywhere. That's what that means. And says no soup for you. That is actually one of the 2 episodes we showed Daniel yesterday. So on this very positive pro Seinfeld note, I think we can wrap up unless anybody has any last comments on anything that we talked about.
I'll just say conversely, we focus on all the important but kind of bad news, so you don't have to. Y'all can get your ass out there and have a Merry Christmas, at least until tomorrow when we do it all again.
Yeah, and also on this channel, I mean, we will be here on Christmas, we will be here on New Year's, and we will have the ARCUK awards, which we have every year. We're not gonna not do that because of the war, so there will be an episode. I don't know yet if it'll be a daily objective. I think it makes more sense for it to be a reality show. In the past, it was an episode with many people and usually an hour long. So that's probably how we're going to do it. But we do support enjoying life, even
well, it makes sense too, because that award show, I don't know how objective it is, but it's definitely reality.
Yeah, I will recuse myself from any award win. I think I won an award last year. I'm not going to be a candidate this year because or nominated, because I don't think that's fair. But
can I nominate Owen Jones?
Oh, we definitely have to have an award that Owen Jones will be. That'll be an award that I don't think we'll have. I think we'll do it in the style of the kind of society that Owen Jones would like to see, and it'll be an award where Owen Jones is the only candidate. But we'll have to think of something special.
I can already see the long list with Owen Jones and George Galloway and Norman Finkelstein and all the rest of them. That's going to be the biggest category. That's one to watch.
Only the best.
We'll see. I don't know if I want to make it negative and think about those. I want that to be like an hour off from the usual stuff, but we'll see. We'll think about it. We'll let you know in the next few days when that is and what's coming up. And in any case, we will be back here tomorrow with the Daily Objective, with the reality show. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Richard. And see you all back here tomorrow.